Hello, and welcome to Leeds Echoes. In this series, I'll be exploring different aspects of Leeds' rich history. Each episode, I'll tell a different story, whether it's a particular building, an entire industry, a lost transportation network. But most importantly, I want to try and figure out how the people that lived and breathed this history felt. What did the local butcher think? Or your neighbour? What did the city sound like? And what did it smell like? These are the kind of things I really want to explore in this series, and I'm really excited where the journey's going to take me. Hopefully I'll see some of you on the way. Statues. Freestanding sculptures in which the realistic, full-length figures of persons, animals, or non-representational forms are carved or cast in a durable material such as wood, metal, or stone. They've been around for a while. The oldest known example dates back to around 30,000 years ago. Over time, and all over the world, they've represented many different things. Gods, deities, spirits, animals, but more recently, and particularly in the 19th century, they represented people. Overwhelmingly, they represented men, white, rich, and powerful men, representing a narrow portion of their society. It is the growing awareness of this fact, coupled with the growing movement of equality in the 21st century that is sweeping the globe, that Leeds City Council has announced a review of all statues in our city. This episode is my message to the council on what I, and many of my contemporaries in Leeds, think should be done. Over the Victorian period, the statue swung heavily from work of art to work of propaganda and often self-aggrandizement. A statue of one's image, which up until then had been the reserve of essentially the mythical, or at least the benevolent ruler, became the aspiration for every upper-middle-class entrepreneur. The statue was fully co-opted to become, to some, an accessible status symbol. And much of this is deeply rooted in the philosophies and psychologies of first the Enlightenment and then Romanticism which followed. With both eras came an immense glorification of the past, and with the Romantic era in particular, the primacy of the individual. And so more statues of individual men were created and erected over the 19th century than likely many other periods of human history combined. And I think here is where we need to establish that there are two clear types of statue that exist in our world today. Either work of art or work of adulation. To me, the works of art are trying to say something, other than just to solely depict a figure. Their purpose and their meaning are as varied as the many people who gaze upon them. To me, all religious statues depicting a human form also fall into this category. Their meaning is just as dependent on the gaze, and all of them tend to depict human forms who it can't even be said for sure really existed. Now, a work of adulation, in terms of a statue, serves to offer nothing more than the depiction of that figure, to say here is this person, and perhaps here is what they did. And the very notion of them being depicted in this form suggests that you worship them, suggests that you respect them, suggests to you that they offered contributions so great, so outweighing their fellow humans, that their form, the mere shape of their body, be captured permanently and displayed for all to see. The vast majorities of these statues were created during the 19th and early 20th century, and they are some of the most frequent we find in our public spaces. Our public spaces are not the place to worship white men from the past. These statues represent a very narrow time period of our history. They claim to represent men who were greatly revered, but only by those who had a voice. And in the 19th century, the only people who had a voice were other rich white men. And we have outgrown the need for these pieces of street furniture. Finally, 27 years after its release to the public, the World Wide Web is bearing its fruit. The open and free sharing of information and knowledge is rapidly educating people to how poorly they've been educated, how little they really know about the history of their own town or city, or even country, how they have been fed a cherry-picked selection of facts which has too long painted only one picture of the world and its past. Dealing with unwelcome reminders of the past looming over city squares is hardly new territory for humans either. We have some pretty fantastic examples to look towards for inspiration. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe was littered with literally thousands of statues of Stalin and Lenin. Many of these countries would be well within their rights to remove and destroy these statues without trace, given the toxicity they represented. Instead, they created dedicated sculpture gardens and museums to dedicatedly house these relics, not to erase history, but correctly contextualize it in an appropriate space, a dedicated space. And this is my proposal for Leeds, that every statue of adulation, as I've defined above, every statue whose sole and only purpose is to inform us about a specific individual, particularly white Victorian industrialists, should be moved to either a newly created sculpture garden in one of Leeds' many parks, or better yet, to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Here they could be wonderfully contextualised with proper history and viewed in marvellous juxtaposition with the works of art already there. We have a purpose-designed sculpture park literally sat waiting to receive them. To me, it makes overwhelming sense. Now, the statues of Don Revie and Billy Bremner at Ellen Road are slightly different. Despite depicting specific men, they're monuments to Leeds United and located at their own stadium, which is essentially private property. The same with the Arthur Aaron VC statue at the end of Eastgate. Here, a specific man is depicted not to represent an achievement, but instead a great sacrifice. And not just his sacrifice, but that made by the entire city and even the country during the Second World War, and celebrating the decades of peace which have followed. The statues I propose removing to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park are Sir Robert Peel from Woodhouse Moor, Queen Victoria from Woodhouse Moor, Arthur Wellesley from Woodhouse Moor, Joseph Priestley from City Square, John Harrison from City Square, James Watt from City Square, Walter Hook from City Square, Sir Peter Fairbairn from Woodhouse Square, and Henry Marsden from Woodhouse Moor. Finally, with Patrick Foley's statue on top of the Pearl Life Assurance building on the Headrow, I'm slightly torn. It's part of the building itself and, again, technically on private property. It is in public view, but barely. It feels like an architectural feature of the building rather than a statue for statue's sake, which is the essential problem with the others. I'd have no real objection either way, I suppose. And what to become of the empty space left behind? It seems a marvellous opportunity to commission new work, reflective of our current times, reflecting the rich and varied cultures that we are so privileged to enjoy in Leeds. Now, I've said many times before that Leeds owes an immeasurable debt to its outsiders, to the many people who have come and made this city their home, who have contributed so much and have often been treated so coldly. Let us create new works of art, not worship, that celebrate the contributions silently made by so many, that give us the gift that so many of us share today. To be proud to live in Leeds. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Leeds Echoes. I really encourage you to get in touch with the council over their planned review. You can reach them at creativecity@leeds.gov.uk until the 31st of July. In the meantime, stay safe and take care.